Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Baggy's Broadcasting Shed up here in Brailes. The sun is shining and it's really quite a pleasant day up here, so welcome to you all. I shall wait for a few people to turn up, as they say. If they do turn up indeed, maybe nobody will come. But I see Kath Murphy has come now. Good afternoon to you, Kath. And I'll wait for a few more. My tip for the day is don't get scammed. It's not a doom and gloom message, because it's quite obvious that these people are about, and since everybody is using the internet a lot more, the chances of you getting scammed, or the chances of an attack of getting scammed, are probably greater at the moment than they have been. So just take extra care, ladies and gentlemen, when you are indeed using the internet, to make sure you've got everything up to date and that everything is in order, so that these nasty people can't get at you. So that's my tip for the day. And today, basically, we are going to have no doom, no gloom, just a couple of vignettes about a very dear old friend of mine who is now dead. He was a great character in Shipston, sadly missed, and a lot of people will probably know of him, and one or two will have known him. It's about 50 years ago I first met him, or 46 odd years ago that I first met him. His name was James Robert Carter Sharp, but he was known to everybody as Sharpie. Now, I'm giving you a bit of a lowdown on Sharpie to start with, and the flat where he lived, because there are several vignettes I want to give about him over the coming few weeks, and if I set the stage properly, I shan't have to repeat myself every time. So Sharpie was an extraordinary man. He'd been in the British Army. I don't know what rank. I don't think anything of any great importance. And then he went off planting in Papua New Guinea, where he said to me, "Baggy, dear boy, do you know where the most ugly women in the world come from?" And I'd say, "No, James, I don't, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. I say unto you, it's in Papua New Guinea. They're the ugliest women in the world." But one or two of my friends suggest that there are other places where the women are equally and possibly more ugly than Papua New Guinea. So apologies to Papua New Guinea before I start getting a lot of trouble about that. So moving on, he fetched up in Shipston, I don't know, possibly 54 or 5 years ago, and poor old James only had one lung, so he was always a bit wheezy, to say the least. And to make matters even worse, he insisted on drying his hand-rolling tobacco up over a gas fire so that it was completely and utterly dry, and he'd roll it into things which he called "my Dutch marine trumpets, I tell you." Well, I don't think James had ever seen the sea, let alone, well, he must have seen the sea to get to Papua New Guinea, but he was not a sailor. And it was quite strange, really, because in those days, people who used hand-rolling tobacco, there were only basically two sets of people that used it, and one were Dutch people and the other were hippies. Now, of course, the world and his friend are using hand-rolling tobacco because it's a darn sight cheaper. Even, I say even, I use it quite regularly these days. So Sharpie spoke in the most extraordinary language. It was a sort of cross between ancient English, pidgin Shipston, and God knows what. But if he wanted to address you, he'd say, "I say unto thee, dear boy," which wasn't really affected, it's just the way he was. And I used to get various telephone calls from time to time. "Maggie, dear boy, is that you?" And I'd say, "Yes, it is, Sharpie. How can I help you?" "Go to Knockers and get me serpent and chips," which meant go down to Knockers' shop, the fish and vegetable shop, where at that that time there was a fryer for cooking fish and chips, and get fish and chips. So Serpent and Chips was fish and chips. He had a wicked sense of humour, and extraordinarily, he was a big man, a sort of bon vivant, for want of a better description, but the one thing he absolutely adored was pussycats. And he had two pussycats while I knew him. The latest pussycat, his last pussycat, was Basil Leather Lugs, Esquire. And he was known as Leather Lugs because he was some sort of, I don't know, a Siamese or a Persian or something or other. And he had no hair at all on his ears, and so he was known as Leather Lugs. The previous one to that was the revered Frederick, but I'm going to say no more about the revered Frederick, because in the future days or weeks there will be a vignette about the revered Frederick. So, dear old Sharpie, you can sort of kind of picture him now, slightly corpulent, certainly nothing like as corpulent as me, but slightly corpulent, on two sticks, waving around in the middle of the road, stopping traffic, always a drink inside him, because that's the way he was. And he used to get into the White Bear with a huge amount of regularity, and we all had damn good fun in there. Now, his flat, where he lived, well, I say flat, he had a little business in Shipston-on-Stour, which was known as the Candy Shop. Now, the Candy Shop is now, I think, called Nice Ladies' Clothes Shop. In fact, I know it's called Nice Ladies' Clothes Shop. I've never been in it. Well, it has been Nice Ladies' Clothes Shop, but
Dice.
Oh, sorry, Dice. Not no, my wife just told me, typical silly old bugger I am. It's Dice, not Nice. But it could be nice, and the dice might be nice. Oh well, there we go. Anyway, so Sharpie had this little shop, which he didn't basically run himself. It was run by a lady called Babs, who used to go around the town in a little Austin A30 car. Some of you will probably remember Babs and her little Austin A30 because she outlived Sharpie for a while, but not that long. Dear Babs loved Sharpie, but unfortunately the love was not reciprocated, and Sharpie used to chase other bits of tail, as he called it. So the sweetie shop, there it was, located next to Roy Tustin, Roy the Papers, and of course just up the other side there was dear Sydney the Radio Payne. Now the shop itself, you went in through the front door, and there was the shop, which had a multitude of little, I say little, they were glass jars, big glass jars, full of various different types of sweets, and then he decanted some of them into just sort of boxes and put them on the counter there, and there were weighing scales, and it was very, very old-fashioned. And out the back there was an ice cream freezer which sort of chugged away, and he wouldn't bumble out the back, but one of the staff would bumble out the back and get you an ice cream. So moving back from the shop itself, the stock room was at the back, which was also Sharpie's sort of downstairs eight. Now in the stock room there was the ancient ice cream freezer, a radio hanging from the ceiling in the form of an orange, and he called that, that's my clockwork orange, Baggy, I say unto thee. And so on Sunday mornings we'd listen to the Archers on this very tinny wireless device called the clockwork orange. Now at the very rear of the property on the ground floor there was a sort of lean-to affair with a bath in it. You'd hardly call it a bathroom because it was pretty squalid. I'm not saying it was dirty, it wasn't dirty, but it was pretty squalid in there, and for 90% of the time the bath was full of boxes of sweets and God knows what and packaging, and I suppose probably once a week Babs instructed one of the staff, one of the gals, to empty the stock and various bits and pieces out of the bath so that Sharpie could be immersed in the bath. One of the lovely ladies that worked in Sharpie's shop was indeed the ancient Flo, who did the Sunday morning shift. Now, the ancient Flo was mother of Val Morgan, Mrs. Morgan, as we all called her, and everybody knew Mrs. Morgan in Shipston. And of course, she was the mother, or she was the mother of Anne, otherwise known as Bopper. So this was Bopper's grandmother. And the ancient Flo played a very mean game of darts, ladies' darts. But anyway, more of that later. So Babs ran James completely. She even ironed his £1 notes, which were basically his pocket money given to him by Babs, so that he could go off with fresh, clean, ironed £1 notes to go to the pub and spend. Now, upstairs, there were 2 rooms, and there was no plumbing at all upstairs. You went upstairs and you went to the left, and there was a very pleasant little sitting room with a gas fire in there, an open gas fire, one of the old ones that had probably been in there since about 1935, where he toasted his tobacco above it in tins to make sure it was of suitable strength for him to inhale into his one lung. And the other room at the back was his bedroom. As I say, there was absolutely zero plumbing up there, so a piddle bucket was installed, and Sharpie used to piddle into a bucket, and I don't know whether he ever pooed into a bucket or not, but Babs in the morning used to come swinging downstairs with his piddle bucket and empty it into the lavatory. So that really is about setting the scenario, because I say there will be more vignettes, and I didn't really want to go through it all over again every time. I wanted everybody to know what it was like. It was a most interesting place where a most interesting man lived. So I suppose it was probably about 48 years ago, poor old Sharpie was found unconscious in his flat, and immediately the ambulance was called and he was carted off under blue lights to Warwick Hospital. So when he got to Warwick Hospital, absolutely livid, because it turned out that he was in an alcoholic coma. He'd started attacking the whiskey instead of staying on the Bass beer, which he normally did. And with, with the consequence that he'd passed out and gone into a deep alcoholic stupor. So once they found out that he was going to live, they shipped him off to the Laughing Academy at Hatton. Now, the Laughing Academy at Hatton is the lunatic asylum that used to be there at the very bottom of the hill, and it is no longer there. It was a pretty gruesome place. I knew it quite well. I used to visit people in there, and in fact I used to take out work to people there when we had a business. So Sharpie, I can remember so well, telling me, and Baggy, I say under these, it was the most horrific experience. He said, I awoke to find a large male man of colour standing at the end of the bed, who was my male nurse. Of course, in those days, Sharpie didn't say a man of colour, but we all know what's what these days. And this man of colour used to bathe him and one thing and another, but the ridiculous part about the whole affair was that he should have been put in the alcoholic unit. But there was no room in the alcoholic unit, so he was in the not quite so mad unit. And there was the sort of very mad unit where the complete lunatics were. And then there was another sort of unit where the sort of semi-all-right people were, and the people that had basically become institutionalised over the years. And he was in that unit, the not so bad unit, with the consequence that after a couple of days he was allowed out. And he and some newfound chums there used to go up to the New Inn at the top of Hatton Hill, which is now, I believe, called the Waterman, or it certainly was called the Waterman the last time I went past it, but it was originally the New Inn. So one of Sharpie's newfound chums was a man of ancient age, as Sharpie said, who carried a large stone around with him wherever he went. And when they were having lunch, the stone was put by the side of him. He put the stone by the side of him at the lunch table, and he took this ruddy stone wherever he went. But anyway, Sharpie said he was quite mad, he said, but a most interesting case. Anyway, so the ridiculous part about it was that there is Sharpie, who, with one lung and been sent there for alcoholic poisoning, is allowed to go to the pub because he'd been put in the wrong unit. So he stumbled all the way up to this new inn with a few of his chums, and of course, having one bellow, one lung, by the time he got to the top of the hill, he was completely, excuse my language, buggered. But he horsed down 2 or 3 pints, and they were all yabbering away at the bar, apparently, one evening. And the magic hour of 8 o'clock came, and somebody said, it's 8:05. And they were meant to be back for 8 o'clock, so they had to stagger down the hill, and Sharpie said, I'm going to finish my pint. And so he was last to go, and he realised that this chap had left his stone there. So Sharpie thinks, oh, bugger me, I better take the bloody stone or we'll never hear the end of it, you see. So Sharpie staggers down the hill with the stone from the pub, gets back, and he goes to this chap, he said, you left your stone on the bar. He said, I bought it back for you. And the bloke turns round and he said, stone? Stone? What do I want a bloody stone for? So that was Sharpie and the stone. So moving swiftly on, there is Sharpie and Blind Mary. Now, one of the visits to the White Bear, and I was actually there, as was Bill Smethurst, Bill the Scribe Smethurst, who edited The Archers. There was Donkey Drop Horsefall, Brian Horsefall, very decent chap indeed, lovely man. There was miserable Pat Marcham, the bank manager, and he was a miserable little man, but I suppose it's not his fault. Well, it was his fault, really, and he was in the wrong profession because he was a bank manager and miserable, so there's no... And all he did all day was moan. And he died in the White Bear, actually, right in front of my eyes. Well, of course it was sad, very sad, but there we go, that's the way it goes. Anyway, there's Sharpie sitting down at the table which now has the death row plaques on it, and he's on that death row plaques thing, by the way, the settle there. And a woman comes into the bar, and Sharpie said, I like the look of that lass, I likes the look of her. And he bellows, come over here, my dear, I wish to make mad, passionate love to you. And I thought, oh God, here we go again. And strange to relate, the woman sort of came straight over, and I thought, goodness gracious me. Sit yourself down, what would you like to drink? So she ordered a drink. And it suddenly became apparent that the reason she'd come straight over to Sharpie was the fact that she was blind, or nigh on blind. Anyway, she was very taken with Sharpie, and Sharpie was very taken with her. So they struck up a bit of a relationship. Well, they struck up more than a bit of a relationship. They fell in lust almost immediately. I won't say love, but they fell in lust almost immediately and went back off to Sharpie's flat, even on that very night, and did their lovely ways with themselves, and that was that. And then Blind Mary got a taxi back to Ettington, where she lived. So the problem mainly was the fact that Sharpie didn't drive, A, because he'd probably forgotten how to drive, B, because he was permanently pissed, and C, he just didn't go out of Shepstone. That was as simple as that. And of course, Blind Mary, who lived in Ettington, or just the other side of Ettington, in fact, she couldn't drive, of course, because she was blind. So they had a bit of a problem a lot of the time, and unless somebody like Bugsy or myself or another chum would bring blind Mary to Sharpie's little flat, they couldn't meet, and neither of them had got enough money to use taxi services, so they relied on the likes of myself to make sure that occasionally they'd meet each other. But as the relationship grew, they got more and more passionate. And Sharpie came into the White Bear one morning, and he said, Mary's asked me to start conducting telephonic sex with her. And I said, oh my God, Sharpie, what does that consist of? Well, he said, you can imagine, can't you, dear boy? And I said, oh, I suppose I can, yes. And, and this went on apparently for several weeks. And one day Sharpie came into the White Bear, and he was particularly breathless and looking a bit grey, actually. Oh, bollo, he said. And he always said bollo. And I said, why do you say bollo rather than bollocks, Sharpie? He said, well, he said, think of gatto. That's gattix, isn't it? And it's bollocks. He said, so therefore it's gatto and bollo. So he said, oh, bollo. And he was breathing very badly. He said, you know, he said last night, he said, he said, Mary telephoned me for telephonic sex at 9 o'clock. Well, I couldn't say no, of course, but you know, he said, I had to bloody fake it, which amused the bar to a huge extent. Well, that's about it for today, because I don't want to drivel on any longer, but there will, in fact, be considerably more vignettes about it, and we'll have a lot more fun. Now, I understand a few things have been going on in and around, but for goodness sake, people do follow the guidelines and do not go out and start meeting other people. It is highly important that you stay in your house and don't go meeting other people and spreading this coronavirus, COVID-19, any further, because it is a very serious situation and it can only be contained by following the government guidelines. So, you know, I'm no particular lover of the government, but we must follow those guidelines. Now, I understand those people that are local to the Black Horse, or locals of the Black Horse, should I say, that Dan Scobie, bless his heart, has set up a Zooming website or a Zoom site in order that people can have a virtual pub occasionally. So you might want to get involved with that. I'm sure that you'll be notified if they'd like you to. So that's about it now, folks. So in the words of Timothy Leary, who's a bit of a hero to me, I enjoyed Timothy Leary, turn on, tune in and drop out. But more importantly, in the words of Mr. Churchill, KVO, keep buggering on, keep safe. Goodbye from the Baggy Broadcasting Company, and see you again shortly. Bye-bye.